Welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about strength. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. The best way to support the podcast right now is to listen daily, rate, review, and to follow or subscribe in your chosen podcast app. The next best way is to check out my new Patreon. Supporting me there gives you early access to upcoming podcast episode topics, digital downloads I've created, and monthly tarot hangouts with me and other listeners. Link will be in the show notes to check that out. And you can always go to my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot for all the latest information related to the podcast and to find images of the cards that I pull. All right, so into our main discussion, and welcome to Season 2 of the podcast. The first season, I introduced tarot through talking about oracle versus tarot cards, myths of tarot, how to find a deck, reading for yourself versus others, and much more. In Season 2, we're going through the first 13 cards, the major arcana, one per episode, and today I'll be talking about the strength card. So strength, this number is associated with this card is usually 8, and I say usually because I actually, in going through my decks today, realized that sometimes the strength card is number 11, which I somehow has never noticed before. So it actually gets switched with the position of the Justice card or Judgment, from what I can tell. And I did some research, so comes from Wikipedia on the Strength card, but it talks about the Strength is traditionally the 11th card, and Justice is the 8th, but the influential Rider-Waite-Smith deck switched the positions of the two cards to make them better fit with the astrological correspondences that were worked out by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, under which the 8th card is associated with Leo and the 11th with Libra. And if you know anything about the zodiac, Leo is often represented by a lion, and Libra shows like the justice scales, like the scales of justice. So the switch was originally suggested in the mysterious cipher manuscripts, which formed the basis for the Golden Dawn's teachings regarding tarot and other subjects. So today, many divination tarot decks use this numbering, particularly in the English-speaking world. So it sounds like historically, Justice was the 8th card, the 11th was Strength, and then when the Rider-Waite-Smith decks came along, those got switched. So it just will depend on the artist and the creator of your tarot deck as to which choice they made. So out of my 5 tarot decks that I pulled the strength card from today, 3 of them have it as the number 8 and 2 of them have it as 11. Since in the order I'm going with, more of them showed it as 8 in the decks that I have, so I'm going to go with that one for today. So we're going to talk about in numerology what 8s are, but then when I get to the Justice card, later on, then I will talk about it again and sort of how these numberings are sort of interchangeable for these cards. So for the number 8 in numerology, that's usually thought of as success, abundance, flow of energy, right? If you think of the number 8 and how it looks, it's sort of like an infinity sign turned on its head or upright. So there's also this that represents this flow of energy, like infinity. Other traits associated with it are sort of this goal-oriented and the strong drive for success. So if you think about the strength card, the depictions commonly seen, sometimes it shows something that looks sort of like literal strength. Often a lion is there, again, sort of associated with that depiction of the 8th strength card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, associated with Leo, so often a lion or another strong animal. In the Library of Esoterica tarot book by Tashin, there were some that showed like a bodybuilder and a lion. There were some that showed actually like an alligator or a crocodile, and but there's always this sort of depiction of domination or taming the lion. something strong. Sometimes it shows like a person riding the lion, which again, sort of that like taming of it. Or sometimes it shows someone or like the lion's opening its mouth, like for the person, or the person's like holding it closed. So, like, this playing with this idea of like a lion and human interacting, and that the human is sort of the one in control, and the lion, um, I guess I'll talk about it more in the meanings, but often symbolizing like your more animalistic self, or even like an inner strength, fighting like your demons, that sort of idea. And then looking through different cards, also the sun is often shown. I have one of the strength cards that I have in my tarot deck showing that, and another one, there's sort of some yellowy halo sun kind of energy, but it's not explicit. And some other cards that are depicted in the Library of Esoterica tarot book by Toshin, there are a lot of suns in that one. And again, sun, like, gives very Leo energy, so, and lion. So I think there's sort of like relation there. So other depictions in the decks that I have, so in the Goddess of Love tarot deck, she renames this card to Lust, and it shows like a goddess on it. She has her arm up. There's lots of like red and yellow roses collaged into the scene with her. There's a lion, sort of like I would say like a historical depiction of a lion or like a beast, not necessarily like an anatomically correct looking lion, that's sort of like staring up at the goddess, and the goddess is like larger in the image, sort of again like showing a bit of like that strength or like domination, taming of the lion. On this card, there's also a snake in the upper left corner and then a sun in the upper right. Um, in the Anima Mundi deck I have, the Strength card is depicted as a Hercules beetle. It also has that infinity symbol underneath, and there's dark colored roses attached to branches in the bottom two corners. And if you don't know what like a Hercules beetle looks like, you actually probably do. It's one of those huge ones. I think it comes from like the rainforests in South America or like Mexico, Central America, that area. It's a very large flying insect. Like, looking up images of it, I see people holding it in their hand and it takes up like half their hand. So it's quite large. It's a species of rhinoceros beetle. So again, sort of showing this, like, I mean, if you think of beetles, they have that really sort of like thick shell that protects them. Um, and just this level of like strength again. Other depictions in the Sassorabito tarot deck by Stacia Burrington. This one has, I would say, probably the most like traditional image of strength, the strength card. It has a lion on it that looks like they're maybe like laying down. They look pretty relaxed. And then there's like a person standing over the lion, that sort of looks like they're in control, and it looks like they're like petting the lion really nicely or like caressing it. But it doesn't look like, right, the lion's gonna like take their head off, or like that there's any fear there. The person seems like pretty calm. So yeah, so those are some of the different depictions of this card. Um, let's see. So if we get into more of the meanings, so like I said, I like to reference the Library of Esoterica tarot book by Toshin. So they do a good job of, they go through each of the cards in a tarot deck and show a lot of images, a lot of different tarot deck depictions of the cards. They sort of pull themes from that. So they talk about, there's this quote of like, the dominance of grace, which I thought was interesting thinking about this card. So this idea of controlling a wild nature of the lion symbolizing passion, raw desire, like animal instinct. It says that there's often, like on cards, a woman shown like wearing a belt and a crown of flowers to represent her close connection to nature. And so there are a lot of flowers on the cards that I have. And then the Goddess of Love tarot deck, there's a lot of roses in that one. And it is sort of in this like crown. It's not necessarily like she's wearing it on her head, but it's like surrounding her, the goddess depicted. They talk about infinity representing the eternal life and endless potential, bravery in the face of adversity, that strength. The strength card is often really about inner strength. So while like it depicts lions or sometimes like a bodybuilder or a alligator, all things that are very sort of like strong physically, the card's really about like, yeah, your control over your thoughts, like your inner demons, your like the parts of you that are maybe animalistic, and sort of like inner strength. I liked this part where they talk about that passion and patience are what the card is about, not coercion. So again, in a lot of these depictions, like you don't see someone like with the lion like chained up or like that they are like totally controlling the lion. It just looks like they're sort of in this like symbiosis, this like balanced relationship with the creature. I pulled some other quotes from the book that say strength asks for the distillation of goals and desires and a renewed focus on core needs, and stamina must be matched by stillness, commitment, and balanced composure, which again I really liked. So sort of that like mastery over your own, again, whatever those things are, ego, inner demons, like anxious thoughts, like sort of this whole idea of like um, it really makes me think of meditation as well, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. So another book I have that I don't think I've talked about or pulled quotes from before, it's called Fearless Tarot, How to Give a Positive Reading in Any Situation by Elia Adam. So I pulled some things from there about this card. Like it talks about that strength is a choice. You can either buckle to what keeps you stuck and afraid, or you can choose excellence. Strength is not manifested in large displays of power, but by gentle, compassionate, self directed corrections in the form of good decisions. Strength is something that needs to be reinforced every day. Just as muscles need to be continuously used to maintain their power, so too does inner strength need to be habitually exercised. And like I said, this sort of makes me think about meditation and sort of like the practice of it. I know for me, like I've been consistently meditating daily the last couple of years, but recently I've been feeling called to start meditating for longer periods of time. I've done it occasionally in the past, but I think I've focused more on my consistency over the past couple of years versus the length of time. But I'm going to work on meditating 15 minutes a day. That's my goal. To sort of build up again that sort of like inner strength and fortitude, especially around like observation of my own thoughts or being able to watch them go by without engaging with them, which is what I really like am thinking about with this card, at least right now. That's what's coming to mind for me, is sort of those, again, the sort of like inner demons kind of thoughts. I don't know why I keep using that phrasing, but that's what's coming to mind right now of like, okay, like, yes, there's maybe these anxious thoughts or there's like all these thoughts I had, and I don't want to be ruled by those. Like, I want to be intentional. I want to be able to view those things and then still make decisions based off of my values and the things that, right, the vision, the things I want in life, and not just like following the thoughts that I often think of as anxious thoughts, just like wherever they want to go, because often that really leads to spiraling. And then it can be hard to get out of that pattern. So in another deck I have, the Anima Mundi deck. I also pulled some quotes. So this is the one that depicts that as that Hercules beetle. And it says, in contrast to the physical willpower of the Chariot, which was yesterday's card and episode. So if you want to check that out, if you haven't, you can do that as well. Strength is about overcoming difficulties through inner strength. So the Chariot, it talks about that sort of like physical aspect of strength or willpower, and then the strength card is actually about this like inner fortitude. And it says stand up for what is right no matter what. And that really stood out to me. It feels really important as we enter our second week of this current US administration, that we need to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's hard, even when it's unpleasant, even when it might get you in trouble. I think that's really like what I'm seeing for this card right now. So the Goddess of Love Tarot deck depicts this card, like I said, as the card Strength gets renamed to Lust, which I read is common in the symbology of the Kabbalah, which is in the Jewish tradition. There's another image of the Strength card renamed to Lust in the Library of Esoterica tarot book by Toshin. And if you ever want to see any of the things I reference, you can go to the show notes or to my website. Under the episode, I have anything that I talk about linked in there. So another quote I pulled from this tarot deck description is: "The heart is the most enlightened technology available to lead you in a life aligned with love and rooted in strength." I really liked that. So the goddess depicted on this card is Rati, who's from Hindu mythology. And Rati is carnal desire, sexual ecstasy, and sensual delights. It says the lust card reminds you that you are in this body and in this life to have as full of an experience as possible. That we can reflect, or this card reflects the idea that lust is sacred when woven with intention. And lust suggests it's time to release the ego or the sexual impulse and to sacrifice your attachments in honor of your evolution. Which again, I really think about with those like spiraling thoughts or sort of getting, pulled down or led astray sort of by the anxious litany of thoughts going through your head. Which again, sort of like might be coming up right now. Like there's a lot of stuff in the news always, but I'm definitely getting the litany of depressing news right now. So I feel like this card's really calling us to, right, sort of like release the ego, release sort of like the thoughts around it, and commit to the action, commit to what you're going to do about it, commit to your goals, commit to your vision, and those types of things in honor of your evolution. And as I talked about earlier, and for this card, the astrological correspondence is with Leo, which again makes a lot of sense for this card as it's often depicted as that lion. And that for the Sasarabito tarot deck by Stasia Burrington, that's the one that has the sort of traditional depiction of a person and a lion. I pulled a quote from there as well. It says, "It may suggest a challenging situation that will require soft but strong approach to resolution." And that really makes me think of like holding boundaries. I know I have some certain situations that come to mind for me, but that like you can hold your boundaries and be both soft and strong when you do so, right? Boundaries don't have to be rude or mean, like, or at least, right? Like, that's not how you have to communicate them. Sometimes people's reactions might make it feel that way, but you can be resolute in those boundaries and still have, right, like love and compassion for the person or thing or whatever you're holding the boundary with, which I know I need to hear sometimes. So that one really felt like a call out to myself. All right, so let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today in relation to this card. Okay, very interesting. So I pulled a card today from the Ophidia Rosa tarot deck. And this is a deck I'm still sort of getting to know. And today I pulled the 10 of Wands, which with this deck, there's a short description for each card. And it says, "Be present at peace, teach those still writhing." Be present at peace, teach those still writhing. I feel like that's very similar to what I was just talking about with the Strength card, of sort of this meditation, this choosing intentionality over maybe what the news cycle says, or sort of the anxious litany of thoughts that you might be having, And I feel like this really says to just, choose what you're going to be present to, choose to be present to your goals, your values inside, and then teach that or maybe even model it, right? You don't necessarily need to teach it in a way we think of where it's like instruction, but sometimes teaching can come by just doing it yourself and other people see that. Um, and I feel like that's really what this is about today. Teach those still writhing. Ooh, and writhing gives me gives me the heebie-jeebies. I don't know, gives me like the shivers, thinking about writhing, right? It makes me think of sort of like a snake or something maybe that's like in pain, thrashing about, sort of, right? And sometimes I think like that's how our thoughts can feel. They can be thrashing about. They might be, again, sort of like taking us down avenues that we don't want to go down or that we know that are not very helpful. And I feel like this card's telling me today to just sort of slow down, like keep that intention, right? Go back to your values, go back to the vision, go back to the goals you have, and to like not get lost, like in the weeds. And then, right, if it feels helpful or available to you, maybe again, like talking about that with others, teaching others, or like modeling what you're doing, which maybe for me is going to be that 15-minute meditation a day, for others, and sort of teaching by example. All right, so thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast will come out daily, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. And there are links for the tarot decks, and those will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And all right, I'll see you soon. Bye bye.